the NLRB has ruled that withholding of regular raises is illegal. Management's assertions that you would not be able to get a raise during the time of contract negotiations is just not true. But if you believe that, it is understandable why that would be scary to you.
Want to get to this local story about the workers at Aerojet Rocketdyne. I know that is a question that we have been asked actually throughout the week. We've been asked about, and we've said it on on social media. We broke the news on social media, and so if you follow us there, you would have known it as soon as it happened. But workers at Aerojet Rocketdyne were not successful in their bid for unionization. The vote was not particularly close. It was 80 against, 29 for the union, which is very disappointing. The vote happened on Wednesday, like we said last week. Workers had an opportunity both before and after their shifts in the employer's conference room to vote. The count was completed the same day because of the small unit, and so I got messages from some of the workers and the union staff telling me the results. And so just a little bit of background, this is the second time that workers have tried to unionize at Aerojet Rocketdyne here in the last year or two. If for longtime listeners of the show and very observant listeners of the show will remember us making note of that during last week in Southern Labor, that Aerojet Rocketdyne employees had filed a petition for union election sometime last year. That election ended up getting pulled because of a lack of support among the bargaining unit, and so then they refiled. Just a note on last week in Southern Labor, the reason that has stopped is because Jonah Furman, the person who was putting together the newsletter for the entirety of the United States, has stopped doing that because he's now on the communications staff for the UAW. So he doesn't have time to do that anymore, understandably. And so we are working on building out capacity to do to collect that information ourselves in-house. But back to the Aerojet story, so the first time, like I said, they pulled the petition before it got to an election, so they didn't have an election. Then they refiled when they felt like they were again over 50% of the people had signed cards. And then once they got the election, it came back that the unit was a bit bigger than they had anticipated. And so there was consideration from the union of pulling the petition again. But what I was told when I talked to folks is that people on the committee inside Aerojet were against that. Were against pulling the petition again. They were really they really wanted to have an election, to just have a shot, to actually have a vote. And that I understand that impulse, and that makes sense. And so the union did not pull the petition. They allowed the vote to go through, even though they were kind of expecting a loss. And so everybody that I talked to, from worker to organizer to international representative, said that, in particular, the biggest kind of thing was management's assertions that a contract would take years to acquire, and not only that, but that during the process of negotiations, Aerojet would be unable to, by law, give out any raises. And so the folks said that was very detrimental to the campaign. That did a lot of damage to the campaign, according to workers and the union. And that's understandable if you believe that, right? Because if you some of the truth is that it could take a while to get a contract. The thing behind that is that whose fault would that be? That would be the companies. It would not be the unions. But it is absolutely not true that you could not give scheduled raises or bonuses that would typically come at certain times during the bargaining process. What is actually true is that the company must maintain status quo. And so status quo does not mean static, right? That nothing can change or that nothing can progress as previously scheduled. It means that the working conditions must be the same as you would have expected but for the union campaign and contract negotiations, right? So regularly scheduled raises, bonuses that you would expect to get, those are still absolutely legal. And in fact, the NLRB has ruled that withholding of regular raises is illegal, right? So, management's assertions that you would not be able to get a raise during the time of contract negotiations is just not true. It's just factually inaccurate. But if you believe that, it is understandable why that would be scary to you. Because, folks in the factory, some of them living paycheck to paycheck, a 3% raise, particularly in this environment of high inflation, is very important. And so even if all you can expect is a 3% raise, it's important to get that 3% raise, right? Eric, the worker that we spoke to last week, said that, management had basically convinced folks that if they unionized, quote, they would lose something. Which is very unfortunate, but it's understandable. And Andre, another one of the workers that I've had communications with, said that he can understand how people could believe, and maybe potentially it might even be true, that in the short term the better thing for an individual would be not to unionize because of all of the dirty tricks that management would pull. But in his belief and his argument and my belief is that in the long term, and potentially even in the short term, but certainly in the long term, unionization is going to be the better thing, both for the individual and the group at Aerojet. But it's a very difficult thing to go against management, and so. Some other consistent lies and misdirections that were maybe less effective than the bit about the contract negotiations, but were certainly there, is that inside the facility, I've been told that anti-union folks were given free rein to, just talk up the case against the union. They were never admonished, told not to discuss the campaign on the floor, while the same thing was not true for the pro-union folks. They were pulled to the side by management. This is according to folks that I have talked to inside of the shop. They were pulled aside and told that you need to be quiet or your job is potentially on the line, which is, of course, illegal and retaliatory and intimidation. But, labor law is not... It doesn't have a lot of teeth in this country. Somebody else bought into some anti-pension arguments, was somehow worried about having a defined benefit retirement plan, saying that, I want to be able to invest my money for retirement and, do with it what I want to do. And, just any analysis of the effectiveness of pensions versus 401ks would show you that is not that's not a winning argument. But, some people believed it.
Right. And you could still take your own money and do what you wish in terms of retirement, especially if you get a union and you get a raise. You can take that pay raise and put it into your own investment account. That's a little silly, and it's right. Sad that actually worked on some folks.
Yeah. Something else is management, I was told, was going around the shop floor handing out vote no bracelets, or I'm voting no, or I'm against the union bracelets, some kind of anti-union bracelets, which is also, that my understanding is that's not legal either. That management cannot be, participants in the campaign, right? They can give their arguments, but they can't go around, handing out vote no stuff, right? Or is that not?
I'm not exactly sure what the legal limit there is. Because you're right, management is not part of the campaign per se.
Right.
That doesn't stop them from running anti-campaigns, but... Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not sure exactly where that line is, but it sounds like they certainly were willing to step up to the line, if not cross it.
Yeah, and even if that is legal, you can understand how it would be intimidating to not take one of those bracelets, right? If everybody else in your shift...
Folks are watching.
Yeah, folks are watching, and if everybody else in your shift is publicly saying they're voting no, and you're the only one, you could potentially put a target on your back, and no doubt that's scary. They were told that, if you just give us a shot, we'll level you up quicker, whatever. And And so, that's kind of the state of things. Even though they lost, Eric did tell me that he doesn't regret participating in the campaign. He said he's made friends that he's going to, that'll be with him for the rest of his life, and that it's been a really powerful experience for him. And so, that's great to hear. Frenchie, the staff organizer with the machinists in this area, told me that he's appreciative of the supporters, and that to the Aerojet employees and anybody else, for that matter, that's interested in unionization in the Huntsville area, the Machinists Union is still here and ready to support, and they and they are actually more or less expecting that workers at Aerojet are going to see here in a couple of years or in a year or so that that management has not kept their promises, and that they're going to want a change. And so the Machinist Union is still going to be there after management has failed to live up to their promises again. So I'll leave you with this really funny story that Eric told me yesterday when I was talking to him. He said that after the election, he was talking to an observer for the company, and this fella said that, I've got a buddy that works for FedEx, and he's been there for 20 years as a driver, and he's trying to get out of it because that FedEx just doesn't pay a lot, and on top of that, they're trying to phase out their drivers and contract out all of their driving work, kind of like Amazon does, and so. He told Eric, the observer for the company, said, I told him he needs to get a job at UPS. Look at how much more money they get than FedEx. And Eric was like, why do you reckon they get that? It's because they're unionized. It's because they've stood up for themselves. UPS didn't just out of benevolence give Teamsters $30, $40 an hour to deliver packages. It's because they, the workers came together, saw the value that they were creating for the company, and demanded that their pay be commensurate with that. And that, they take home more of the profits. And so, that's kind of a funny story that, you've got an active participant in an anti-union campaign advising his friends to go work for a union company because of the obvious benefits of it.
Right. Well, and I would just say, I do appreciate everyone's efforts for the campaign. It's not
Absolutely.
an easy thing to do, and win or lose, it's a tough challenge, and so respect everyone's efforts there. I definitely hope there's going to be a lot of reflection and debriefing and kind of analyzing, what went well, what didn't, obviously, and trying to learn from it and move forward in a positive way where you can really, build back better.
Yeah.
So to speak. Not to steal a Joe Biden line right as we're about to talk to Lee Harris and dissect him a little bit.
Yeah.
But
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.